The silence of the void wasn't empty. It was a living, breathing pressure against the hull of the Ark Fleet Odyssey for 5 centuries. That pressure had been the only constant for the scattered remnants of humanity. They were the children of a dead star, nomads adrift in a galaxy that regarded them with a mixture of pity and contempt. Their home, a blue marble they now knew only through archived data streams and the mournful songs of their elders, was gone, consumed in the fire of the solar flare cascade. All that remained were the Orcs, colossal, cobbled-together vessels that were less ships and more migratory ecosystems, each one a testament to desperate ingenuity and stolen time. Kalen felt the pressure more than most. He was a Voidwalker, one of the few born with the neural resonance required to interface with the Oracle, the ship's navigation and FTL heart. It wasn't human technology. The Oracle was a salvaged relic, a biomechanical consciousness of unknown origin that sang in a language of quantum probability and gravitational tides. To pilot the Odyssey was to let that alien song into your mind, to let its currents pull you through the folds of space-time. For Kalen, it was a constant communion with a silent god, a process that left faint, shimmering after-images in his vision and the whispers of forgotten starlight in his thoughts. He was revered and feared in equal measure, a necessary anomaly who walked the line between navigator and madman. The ship was dying, not with the sudden violence of a reactor breach, but with the slow, agonizing decay of an ancient body. Recycled air tasted thin and metallic, gravity fluctuators groaned under the strain, and the Oracle itself was becoming erratic. Its song was growing discordant, filled with static and sorrow, leading the Odyssey into increasingly perilous, uncharted systems far from the established galactic lanes. The Stellacracy, the grand coalition of elder species that governed the known galaxy, had made their position clear. Humanity was quarantined. The Xylanes, a crystalline species whose logic was as sharp and unyielding as their bodies, were the primary architects of this decree. They peddled a theory, dressed in the language of scientific caution, that humans were carriers of the flare contagion, a stellar sickness that had killed Sol and could infect other stars. It was baseless, a convenient excuse to keep the desperate, resource-draining refugees far from their pristine core worlds. The truth was, simpler humanity was a messy, unpredictable variable in their perfect equation, a ghost they preferred to keep on the galactic fringe. The Elder Council of the Odyssey convened in the Grove, a cavernous biodome where genetically resurrected Terran trees strained toward the cold. Artificial sunlight of the ceiling lamps. Mara, the Council's matriarch, stood before the Oracle's primary interface, a pulsating sphere of milky light that hung suspended over a pool of coolant. Her face, etched with the worries of 1 billion souls, was grim. The last long-range scan shows nothing for 50 light years, she announced, her voice echoing in the humid air. No rogue planets to mine, no nebulae to harvest for water. We are bleeding atmosphere, and the recyclers are at 17% efficiency. A murmur of despair rippled through the assembled representatives. Yorick, the fleet's security chief, stepped forward, his heavy magnetic boots clanking on the metal walkway. He was a man forged in the harsh realities of their exile, who believed survival was a thing to be taken, not requested. The Stellacracy has a listening post on the edge of the Oort cloud of Cygnus X1, he stated, his tone flat and hard. It's a military installation, but lightly defended. We could take their supplies, their fuel, and be gone before a fleet could respond. Mara's eyes narrowed. An act of war. Jorik, we are refugees, not pirates. Such an act would give the Xylans the excuse they need to hunt us to extinction. Jorik scoffed. They are already letting us die. What is the difference? A quick death fighting is better than a slow one starving in the dark. It was then that Kalen stumbled into the grove, his body trembling, eyes wide and unfocused. The shimmering afterimages were brighter than ever, coalescing into phantom constellations that danced at the edge of his sight. "The Oracle!" he gasped, leaning against the railing for support. "It's singing a new song." He pushed himself forward, his gaze fixed on the glowing sphere. He had been in the node, the small, shielded chamber where he connected directly with the machine. When it happened, the usual chaotic symphony of data had suddenly silenced, replaced by a single, impossibly clear melody. It was a beacon, a focused transmission cutting through the noise of the cosmos. He placed his hand on the Oracle's interface, and the light within it shifted, swirling into a complex star chart that no one recognized. At its center, a single point of light pulsed in time with a rhythmic beat that only Kalen could hear. "It's a signal," he whispered, his voice filled with a reverence that silenced the room. From there, he pointed to a region on the map marked with the Stellacracy's starkest warning sigil, a fractured star. The terminus. Mara breathed, a name spoken only in cautionary tales. The dead zone, a vast sector of space declared permanently off-limits, a graveyard of a precursor civilization known only as the Architects, who, according to legend, had torn the fabric of reality in a technological cataclysm. The Stellacracy enforced the quarantine with lethal prejudice, claiming the region was saturated with reality-warping radiation and self-replicating nanite plagues. "No one has entered the terminus and returned," Jorik said, his voice laced with suspicion. "It is a tomb. The Oracle is malfunctioning, leading us to our deaths." "No," Kalen insisted, his connection to the machine flooding him with an unshakable certainty. "It's not a malfunction, it's an invitation. It feels like hope." He looked at Mara, his eyes pleading. "The song is clear. It speaks of a sanctuary, a cradle hidden from the Stellacracy, a world built for us." The debate raged for days. Jorik and his faction argued for the raid, a tangible plan with predictable, albeit dire, consequences. Kalen's beacon was a ghost story, a hallucination from a failing machine and its unstable pilot. The visions were worsening. In his sleep, Kalen walked corridors of impossible geometry and saw skies filled with twin suns. He felt the collective fear of his people as a physical ache in his chest, a feedback loop through the Oracle that threatened to shatter his sanity. He was caught between the abyss ahead and the oblivion behind, and the weight of the choice was crushing him. He saw the doubt in Mara's eyes, the pragmatist in her warring with the desperate leader willing to grasp at any straw. To her, the terminus was the ultimate gamble, a bet placed on the visions of a man who spoke to a machine they had never truly understood. The breaking point came not from a debate, but from a deafening groan that echoed through the entire superstructure of the Odyssey. A cascade of warning sirens blared as a section of the primary atmospheric containment field on the aft habitat ring failed. Red lights flashed across the grove, painting the worried faces in a bloody glow. an AI voice, devoid of emotion, announced the grim reality: atmospheric integrity at 73%. Total life support failure projected in 30 standard cycles. 30 days. The timer on their extinction had started. In the ensuing panic, Mara's decision was forged. Her gaze fell upon Kalen, not with hope, but with the cold resolve of a leader with no good options left. "You will go," she declared, her voice cutting through the chaos. "Yorick, you will provide him with our fastest long-range scout, the Stardust. You will select a crew, skeptics, engineers, people who will not be swayed by false hope. Their mission is to verify this beacon. If it is real, they will signal us. If it is a phantom, they will return." She turned to Kalen, her expression a mask of hardened duty. "You have 24 hours to prepare. You will take this ship into the darkness. Kalen, for all our sakes, pray you find a dawn." And so it was decided. As the engineers worked frantically to patch the hemorrhaging Ark, Kalen stood before the Stardust, a sleek, arrow-headed vessel dwarfed by the colossal frame of its mothership. Yorick stood beside him, handing him a data slate with the crew manifest. 3 names: a grizzled engineer who trusted only physics, a cynical medic who had seen too much death, and a former security officer loyal only to Yorick himself. A crew designed to watch him, to doubt him. As the airlock hissed shut, Kalen took one last look at the Odyssey, a dying titan adrift in an uncaring sea, a city of ghosts clinging to a fading dream. The Stardust's engines ignited, a silent flare of blue plasma, and the small ship broke away, a single spark of defiance arcing toward the forbidden, suffocating blackness of the terminus. The oracle's song was faint now, a distant melody calling him into the heart of the galaxy's greatest mystery, promising either their salvation or their final, unmarked grave. The journey into the void was a study in pressurized silence. Inside the Stardust, every hum of the life support, every click of a console, was amplified in the cramped confines of the cockpit. Kalen felt the weight of his 3 crewmates' skepticism as a physical force, a constant, low-grade radiation of doubt. Ilyra, the engineer, was a woman who found solace only in the quantifiable. Her fingers danced across diagnostic screens, her brow furrowed in a permanent state of concentration as she monitored the ship's vital signs. She treated the vessel not as a home, but as a patient with a terminal diagnosis. And Kalen was the experimental, unproven treatment she was forced to administer. Across from her, Leah, the medic, observed Kalen with a detached clinical eye. Her own form of diagnostics involved tracking his biometrics, noting the elevated heart rate, the erratic REM cycles, the telltale signs of a mind under immense strain. To her, the oracle's song was a symptom, a neurological fever she was tasked with managing until it inevitably broke him. And then there was Rorik, the security officer, a stoic shadow Yorick had assigned to the mission. He rarely spoke, his presence a silent judgment. He sat in the co-pilot's chair, his hands resting near the weapon systems, his gaze shifting between the star-dusted viewport and Kalen, making it clear that his loyalty was to the mission's parameters, not its profit. As they pushed deeper into the uncharted black, the oracle's song in Kalen's mind began to change. It was no longer just a single, guiding melody. It was evolving, branching into complex harmonies, weaving in fragments of imagery and emotion. He saw flashes of spiraling architecture bathed in the light of a binary star, felt a profound sense of ancient loneliness, and heard whispers in a language that felt both alien and achingly familiar. "Neural activity is spiking again," Leah announced, her voice flat, as Kalen flinched from a particularly vivid vision of a collapsing nebula. "You need to rest." "Kalen, disconnect from the drive for a few hours." Kalen shook his head, rubbing his temples. "I can't. The signal, it's showing me things. Not just where to go, but what is there. It's trying to communicate." Ilara swiveled in her chair, her expression one of profound irritation. "There is no signal. Kalen, I've run every spectrum analysis we have. Wide band, narrow band, quantum entanglement resonance. Nothing. The space ahead is dead quiet. Whatever you're hearing is being generated by the Oracle, which, I will remind you, is a 500-year-old piece of salvage that is actively failing." "It's not failing. It's focusing," Kalen countered, his voice raw with frustration. "It's filtering out the noise. Don't you feel it? The silence out here isn't empty. It's waiting." His words hung in the air, dismissed by the others as the ramblings of a man losing his grip. They were flying blind, trusting only a ghost in their machine. And every passing hour frayed their nerves thinner. The boundary of the terminus appeared not on a map, but as a tangible rift in the cosmos. One moment, they were in the familiar, star-strewn void of the galactic fringe. The next, they crossed an invisible threshold into a place where the rules felt different. The stars ahead seemed sharper, colder, their light stripped of any warmth. A faint, violet-gray haze permeated the darkness, a cosmic dust that played tricks on the eyes and set the ship's external sensors screaming with radiation alarms. "That's it," Ilara said, her voice tight. "Reality shear radiation. Exactly what the Stalacracy archives predicted. Hull integrity is already down 0.01%. We need to turn back." "No," Kalen said, his hands gripping the navigation controls. The Oracle's song had swelled into a triumphant chorus, drowning out the alarms in his head. "The radiation is a shell, an outer layer. It wants us to keep going." "It's a warning," Ilara snapped, her composure finally cracking. "Every piece of hard data we have is telling us this is a death trap." It was Rorik who broke the standoff. His voice was calm, but carried the unyielding weight of command. Mara's orders were to verify the beacon. "We haven't done that yet. Press on. Kalen. But the moment our hull integrity drops a full percentage point, I am turning this ship around myself." Ilara shot him a venomous glare, but returned to her console, her fingers flying as she rerouted power to reinforce the energy shields. They plunged into the haze. For hours, they flew through the eerie twilight of the terminus, a graveyard that dwarfed any battlefield humanity had ever known. The wreckage of the architects was all around them, a silent testament to a war of unimaginable scale. They saw Dyson spheres cracked open like eggshells, their dead inner stars leaking pale light into the void. Star lifters, constructs large enough to drain plasma from gas giants, floated in pieces, their hulls scarred with weapons impacts the size of small continents, and the ships, derelict vessels that defied human comprehension, their organic-looking frames shattered, exposing crystalline superstructures that still pulsed with faint, residual energy. It was a place of profound, Cosmic horror, and the sheer scale of the destruction was a heavier weight than any radiation. "My gods," Leah whispered, her cynicism momentarily forgotten as she stared out at a planet that had been sheared cleanly in half, its molten core frozen in a permanent, agonizing bleed. What could have done this? Kaelin didn't have an answer. But the oracle's song had taken on a sorrowful tone, a lament for the silent giants that surrounded them. The beacon was stronger here, clearer. He followed its thread through the cosmic debris field, a path of gravitational whispers that led them away from the larger wrecks and toward a dense asteroid cluster. "The source is in there," Kaelin said, pointing the ship's nose toward the swirling field of rock and ice. Ilara's scanners were useless, overwhelmed by the radiation and the gravitational distortions from the wreckage. "Flying into that is suicide," she stated bluntly. "We're relying solely on your bar feelings." "It's not a feeling. It's a key." Kaelin tried to explain, the concept blooming in his mind with perfect clarity from the oracle's song. The beacon isn't a simple broadcast. It's a sequence, a pattern. It's asking us to resonate with it. We have to modulate the FTL drive's energy output to match the frequency of the song. The idea was insane. Using the FTL drive for anything other than a jump was a catastrophic risk. It could tear the ship apart or, worse, create a localized space-time rupture. Ilara's face went pale. "Absolutely not. I will not allow you to turn our only way home into a bomb based on a voice in your head." Kaelin turned to Rorik, his eyes burning with an intensity that seemed to finally pierce the man's stoic armor. "Your orders were to verify the beacon. This is the only way. If I'm wrong, we die here. But if we turn back now, everyone on the Odyssey dies for certain. This is the last lock on the last door. We have to turn the key." Rorik held his gaze for a long, tense moment, the fate of their species balanced on the edge of his decision. Finally, he gave a curt nod. "Do it." With a triumphant surge of adrenaline, Kaelin began the sequence. Ilara, under Rorik's unblinking stare, reluctantly rerouted the power, her hands shaking as she bypassed safety protocols that had been hard-coded for centuries. Kaelin closed his eyes, letting the oracle's song fill him completely. He became the conductor of an impossible orchestra, his hands moving over the controls, shaping the raw power of the FTL drive into a complex waveform of energy. The stardust shuddered violently, alarms shrieking as its core threatened to overload. A wave of pure, harmonic energy pulsed from the ship. Not light, not sound, but a ripple in the fabric of space itself. For a moment, nothing happened. The ship groaned, its systems flickering. "It didn't work," Ilara said, her voice a mix of relief and despair. But then, a change. The asteroids around them began to move, not randomly, but with a deliberate, synchronized grace. They shifted aside, massive chunks of rock pulling back to reveal a perfect sphere of absolute blackness they had been concealing. It was a void within the void, a hole in reality that swallowed all light. It was a stealth field, a perfect shield of cloaking technology centuries beyond anything the Stellacracy possessed. As the field dissolved, it revealed what lay within. It was not a planet. It was a ship, a warship. It was colossal, a black, angular leviathan easily 1,000 kilometers long, built in the same terrifying, beautiful style as the architect ruins around it. But this one was whole. It was pristine, undamaged, its hull etched with geometric patterns that seemed to shift and writhe as they watched. It was a predator, sleeping in a boneyard. The beacon, the song of hope, was coming from the heart of this ancient, silent weapon. Before anyone could react, a beam of energy, pale and white, lanced out from the warship's hull and enveloped the stardust. It wasn't a weapon, it was a tractor beam. The scout ship's engines died instantly. Its controls locked. They were being pulled in. A minnow caught in the jaws of a kraken. As they were drawn toward a slowly opening hangar bay, the dark hull of the architect vessel began to awaken. Lines of cold, blue light traced across its surface, revealing weapon emplacements and engine ports. The ship was coming online. And in the sudden, terrifying silence of their powerless cockpit, a new signal cut through the comms, overriding everything. It was not the alien song of the Oracle. It was a crackling, looping, automated broadcast, a voice distorted by time and desperation. It was a human voice, speaking in a dialect of old Terran that had been dead for 500 years. It was a distress call. The hangar bay of the Architect warship was a cathedral of silent, alien engineering, vast, cavernous, and bathed in a cold, sterile blue light. It was large enough to swallow the Odyssey whole. The stardust was deposited onto a landing platform with a gentle precision that belied the tractor beam's overwhelming power. The moment the ship settled, the external lights of the bay intensified, and the looping, ancient distress call cut off, replaced by a profound and unnerving silence. For a long minute, no one inside the scout ship moved or spoke. They were trapped, powerless, inside a ghost ship from a dead civilization. The sheer impossibility of their situation was a suffocating weight. The air in the cockpit grew thick with unspoken fear. Ilara's hands were frozen over her console. Her belief in the predictable laws of physics shattered. Leah was monitoring their biometrics, her own heart rate a frantic, percussive beat against the silence. Rorik had unholstered his sidearm, a gesture of defiance that felt pathetically small in the face of the unknown. Kalen, however, felt a strange sense of calm. The Oracle's song was gone, but the feeling of hope it had imparted remained, now mingled with a deep and resonant curiosity. He felt no malice from the vessel, only an ancient, patient intelligence that was waiting. A soft chime echoed through their ship, and the main viewport flickered, displaying a message written in the universal glyphs of the Stellacracy. The translation appeared below it in standard human text: Disembark. You are safe. Safe? Ilara scoffed, her voice a strained whisper. We've been captured by a warship from a civilization that supposedly wiped itself out. Nothing about this is safe. We don't have a choice, Rorik said, his voice grim as he reholstered his weapon. The ship's systems are still locked down. We can't fly. We can't fight. We either walk out that door or we wait in here to die. He looked at Kalen. You led us here. You go first. Kalen nodded, a sense of destiny settling over him. He unstrapped himself and walked to the airlock, the others following hesitantly behind. When he cycled the outer door, the air that greeted them was a surprise. It was breathable, cool, and carried a faint, clean scent like ozone after a storm. The atmosphere was a perfect Terran mix. Stepping onto the landing platform, they were struck by the sheer scale of the place. The ceiling was lost in a haze of blue light far above, and the walls were lined with what looked like dormant alcoves, each one large enough to house a fighter craft. The floor beneath their feet was a seamless, dark metal that seemed to absorb sound, muffling their footsteps. As they stood there, a section of the hangar floor ahead of them began to glow. A holographic figure flickered into existence, coalescing into the image of a man. He was tall, dressed in a simple, form-fitting gray uniform devoid of any rank or insignia. His features were human, but possessed a strange, ageless quality. His eyes, the color of a pale winter sky, held a deep and unsettling wisdom. "Welcome to the Vindication," the hologram said, its voice calm and synthetically perfect, yet tinged with an echo of genuine warmth. "I am Janus. I am the warden of this facility and the sender of the beacon." The crew stared, stunned into silence. Janus, a human name. His form was a perfect, high-fidelity projection, far more advanced than any holographic technology they had ever seen. "You're human," Leah finally stammered, taking a half-step forward. "By origin, yes," Janus replied. "Though my current state is more complex, I am the vessel's primary AI, integrated with the consciousness of its last living commander. I am a ghost, a memory, and a caretaker." He gestured to the vast, silent hangar around them. "This ship, the Vindication, is one of the last remnants of the Arctech fleet. It is also your inheritance." The word sent a shockwave through the small group. Their inheritance? The idea was ludicrous. The architects weren't human. Ilara stated, her scientific mind grasping for a foothold of logic. Their biology, their technology, it's completely alien. "Not as alien as you have been led to believe," Janus corrected gently. "The Stellacracy has spent millennia curating a very specific narrative. They tell you humanity is a young, volatile species, a galactic anomaly. The truth is far older and far more tragic." He began to walk, his holographic form gliding effortlessly over the floor, and beckoned them to follow. As they walked, the walls of the hangar began to change. The dormant alcoves lit up, not with ships, but with holographic displays, creating a moving panorama of history. The images were stark, brutal, and completely upended everything they knew. They saw images of early humanity, not on Earth, but on a different world, orbiting a binary star. They saw the rise of a vast human empire, one that spanned 1,000 systems and achieved technological wonders that dwarfed even the Stellacracy. They were the architects. "We were the first," Janus explained, his voice a somber narration to the epic unfolding around them. Before the Xylans, before the silicon-based life of the core worlds, humanity rose to power. We were explorers, builders, but we were also arrogant. We believed we were the sole intelligence in the universe, and we grew complacent. The images shifted to show the arrival of a new force, a nightmarish swarm of biomechanical entities that seemed to pour from rips in space-time. It was a war of extinction. The Architect Empire, for all its power, was caught off guard. Systems fell. Worlds burned. The holographic scenes became a dizzying montage of cosmic warfare, of planets cracking under the strain of reality-bending weapons, of fleets clashing in fire and ruin. The terminus was not the site of a technological accident. It was the final battlefield. "This," Janus said, stopping before an image of a shattered Dyson sphere, "is where our empire died. We fought the invaders to a standstill, but at a catastrophic cost. We broke reality to defeat them. leaving this entire sector a poison graveyard. We won the war, but we lost everything else." He turned to them, his pale eyes filled with a digital sorrow. In the final days, a plan was made, a desperate last resort. Project Legacy. We gathered the last uncorrupted human DNA, the memories of our culture, our science, our history, and we sent it out into the dark. We found a young, quiet world in an uncharted spiral arm, a planet with the perfect conditions to support life. We seeded it. We guided its evolution from afar, using the last of our technology to protect it from cosmic threats. We gave our own Genesis a second chance. He looked directly at Kalen. We gave you Earth. The revelation was staggering, a blow that left them reeling. They were not a young species. They were a refugee colony, a second planting of a civilization that had already risen and fallen. The solar flare cascade that had destroyed their home. It was not a natural event, Janus confirmed, anticipating Kalen's thoughts. The Xylans and the other elder races of the Stellacracy eventually discovered the truth of our existence. They found the ruins in the terminus, pieced together what had happened, and they were terrified. They feared the return of the architects. When they found Earth, they saw not a primitive species, but the seeds of arrival. The flare cascade was their solution, a carefully engineered stellar event designed to wipe the slate clean, to erase the last remnant of their predecessors. They created a quarantine to ensure no survivors could ever rise to challenge them again. Jorik's plan to raid the listening post suddenly seemed like a child playing with fire. They weren't just facing a political blockade. They were the targets of a 500-year-old genocide. "The Oracle," Kalen whispered, the pieces clicking into place. It wasn't just a navigation device. It was a key. Janus finished. One of several we scattered among the Ark fleets. A biomechanical beacon, programmed to activate when the last remnants of humanity faced imminent extinction. It was designed to lead those with the proper genetic resonance, the descendants of our old Void Walkers back here. Back home. Janus led them from the hangar into a transport system, a silent, frictionless tube that whisked them through the heart of the colossal ship. They passed through vast, dormant stasis chambers containing millions of sleeping human forms, through silent libraries of crystalline data, and past engineering decks where incomprehensible machinery lay waiting. The Vindication wasn't just a warship, it was a lifeboat, an ark of knowledge, power, and people waiting for its inheritors. Their destination was the bridge. It was a cavernous dome that offered a 360-degree view of the void outside, but instead of stars, the viewport showed the interior of a massive, spherical chamber. They were docked inside an even larger structure. The Vindication is the heart of this facility, Janus explained. But this is the Sanctuary, a mobile, self-sufficient world engine, cloaked from all known forms of detection. It has been waiting here for centuries, building, repairing, preparing. As he spoke, the viewport shimmered, and the cloaking field outside dropped. They were no longer in the terminus. The Sanctuary had moved. Before them, suspended in the blackness, was a familiar sight, the bruised and bleeding form of the Ark Fleet Odyssey, adrift and vulnerable. "I have been tracking your fleet since you entered the terminus," Janus said. "Their life support is critical. Their time is running out." He turned his full attention to Kalen, his hologram solidifying as if drawing power from the very air. "The Oracle led you here, Kalen, but I brought you. Your resonance is stronger than any I have detected in 5 centuries. This ship, this legacy, it answers to you." The Vindication needs a commander. Our people need a leader. The Stellacracy believes they have buried their past. It is time to show them that their ghosts have returned, armed with the fury of a forgotten empire. The choice was laid bare. It was no longer about survival. It was about reclamation, about vengeance. The weight of a fallen civilization settled onto Kalen's shoulders, not as a burden, but as a mantle of terrible, awe-inspiring purpose. The integration of the Ark Fleet Odyssey into the Sanctuary was a process of managed miracles, guided by Janus and the Vindication's automated systems. Massive docking arms, constructs of gleaming, self-repairing metal, extended from the world engine's interior. They gently encased the battered human fleet, pulling the dying Arcs into climate-controlled bays that dwarfed the Vindication's own hangar, pressurized umbilicals, thick as ancient Terran redwoods, connected to the ships, flooding their failing life support systems with clean, sweet air and stabilizing their groaning power cores. For the 500,000 souls aboard the Odyssey, it was a sudden, incomprehensible salvation. One moment, they were gasping for recycled air and praying for a quick end. The next, gravity stabilized. Lights shone with their full, intended brightness. And the ship's AI announced that all systems were functioning at optimal levels, powered by an external source of near-infinite capacity. The transition from near-death to absolute safety was so abrupt it left the population in a state of stunned, euphoric shock. Mara and the Elder Council were brought aboard the Vindication, their faces a mixture of disbelief, awe, and primal fear as Janus calmly explained their true history. They stood on the bridge, a place of silent, overwhelming power, and watched the holographic records of their architect ancestors, the story of their fall, and the deliberate, calculated genocide orchestrated by the Stellacracy. The revelation did not bring them comfort. It ignited a cold, deep-seated rage that had been simmering for 500 years. The pity they had felt for themselves was replaced by the fury of the betrayed. Jorik, the security chief, looked at the dormant weapon displays on the bridge with a hungry, a vindicated gleam in his eyes. "They didn't just let us die," he snarled, his voice a low growl. "They killed our world. They hunted us. They lied to us about our own nature." He turned to Mara, his face a mask of grim resolve. "Every law, every treaty they forced upon us was a lie. We owe them nothing, not mercy, not negotiation, nothing but retribution." The sentiment spread like wildfire through the fleet. The story of the architects, passed down from the council and confirmed by Janus's irrefutable data, transformed them. They were no longer refugees. They were the last scions of a fallen empire, the inheritors of a legacy of power and pain. The fear that had defined their existence was burned away, leaving behind the hardened steel of vengeance. But Kalen felt a growing disquiet. He was hailed as a savior, the prophet who had led them to their promised land. Yet as he walked the corridors of the Vindication, he felt less like a commander and more like a conduit for something far older and more dangerous than himself. Janus had granted him command access, and the ship responded to his thoughts, his intentions, with an alarming immediacy. With a mere flicker of will, he could view the schematics of a planet-killer torpedo or access the tactical logs of a war that had ended millennia ago. The power was intoxicating, and it terrified him. He spent his time not on the bridge, but in the ship's data archives, vast crystalline libraries where the memories of his ancestors were stored. He didn't just read their history, he experienced it. He walked the gleaming cities of their lost worlds, felt the pride of their achievements, and then witnessed the horror of their fall. He felt the collective agony of a billion souls facing annihilation, a psychic wound that echoed through the ship's very architecture. He understood their rage, their desire for vengeance. He felt it in his own blood, but he also saw the arrogance that had led to their downfall, the hubris of a species that believed itself the master of creation. He feared that in reclaiming their legacy, his people would also reclaim the flaw that had destroyed it. His crew from the Stardust had been integrated into the new command structure, each reacting to their new reality in different ways. Ilara was in paradise, a technological wonderland that defied her wildest dreams. She worked tirelessly with Janus, learning the secrets of architect engineering, her mind ablaze with the possibilities. Rorik, ever the soldier, had found his place under Yorick, helping to train the newly formed Vindication Guard, a fighting force composed of the Ark's security personnel, now armed with weapons that could slag a Stellacracy cruiser with a single shot. It was Leah, the medic, who shared Kalen's unease. She had taken charge of the sanctuary's medical facilities, which included stasis bays holding millions of their architect ancestors in suspended animation. They're not dead, Kalen, she told him one cycle. Her voice hushed as they stood before a sea of cryopods. Janus says they can be reawakened, an entire civilization, a population of billions, waiting for a command. She looked at him, her eyes wide with a new kind of fear. Yorick and the Council are already talking about it. They want to rebuild the Empire, to raise an army of our ancestors and sweep the Stellacracy from the stars. They are our people, Kalen said, though the words felt hollow. Are they? Leah countered. They are people from another time, another mindset. They fought a war that broke the galaxy. What will happen when they wake up in a universe that has forgotten them? A universe that tried to erase their children? Will they want peace? Or will they want to finish the war they lost? Her question haunted him. The plan, championed by Yorick in gaining traction within the Council, was as simple as it was terrifying. Awaken the architects, arm the Vindication, and strike at the heart of the Stellacracy. Their first target was to be Xylos, the crystalline homeworld of the Xylans, the architects of their suffering. It was to be a message, an act of judgment that would announce their return to the galaxy. Kalen found himself increasingly isolated. His visions of hope had led them to a weapon, and his people were now eager to pull the trigger. He sought out Janus, hoping to find an ally in the ancient, dispassionate AI. He found the hologram overlooking a simulation of the proposed attack on Xylos, a silent, deadly ballet of orbital bombardment and planetary invasion. You were the ship's commander, Kalen said, his voice echoing in the vast simulation chamber. You saw the end of the First Empire. Do you truly believe this is the way Janus's holographic form turned, his pale eyes unreadable? My purpose is to ensure the survival and restoration of humanity. Jorik's plan is the most direct path to that objective. The Stellacracy will not allow us to exist peacefully. They have proven that. To show mercy would be to invite our own extinction. There is a difference between survival and conquest, Kalen argued. We have the sanctuary. We are safe, hidden. We can rebuild. We can grow. We don't have to repeat the past. The past is not done with us, Janus replied. his voice losing its synthetic warmth and taking on a colder, harder edge. The forces that the architects fought were not entirely destroyed. They were pushed back, scattered. The Stellacracy's greatest fear is not us, but what might follow us out of the darkness. Their quarantine of the terminus was not just to contain our legacy, but to hide a wound in the universe that has never truly healed. A new war is coming. Kalen, one way or another. Is it not better to face it from a position of strength? The AI's logic was flawless, chilling, and it offered no comfort. It framed their impending vengeance not as a choice, but as a grim necessity. Kalen was trapped between his people's thirst for retribution and a machine's cold, unassailable calculus of survival. The decision was ultimately forced upon him. The council voted, and the result was nearly unanimous. They would awaken a contingent of the Architect Legions, the original soldiers of the Empire, and they would begin the war. Kalen, as the nominal commander of the Vindication, was to give the final activation command. He stood on the bridge, the weight of billions of lives, both sleeping and awake, resting on his word. Before him, on the main viewport, was the activation sequence for the stasis chambers. Jorich, Mara, and the rest of the council stood behind him, their faces lit by the glow of the console, their expressions expectant, hungry. He looked at the faces of his people, saw the centuries of pain and fear now twisted into a singular, burning desire for revenge. He saw the logic in Janus's argument, the brutal truth of their position, and he knew that if he gave the order, he would be unleashing a storm that might consume the galaxy, a fire that might burn away what was left of their own humanity. He thought of Leah's question, will they want peace? Or will they want to finish the war? He looked at the faces around him and saw the answer. They were already at war, in their hearts. His hand hovered over the console. The choice was his. He could be the savior who gave his people the sword they craved, or the traitor who denied them their vengeance. The silence on the bridge stretched into an eternity. The fate of an empire, both old and new, held suspended in the space between his finger and the cold. Glowing panel. The silence on the bridge was a physical entity, a black hole of expectation that threatened to pull all of them into its singularity. Kalen's hand trembled over the glowing activation panel, the pressure of 1 billion sleeping souls and 500,000 vengeful ones converging on the tip of his finger. He saw the reflection of his own face in the polished console, the eyes of a man he no longer recognized, haunted by the ghosts of an empire he had never known. He felt Jorich's impatient gaze burning into his back, heard Mara's sharp, held breath, and sensed the collective will of his people pushing him toward the precipice. They wanted the sword. They wanted the fire. They wanted to become the storm that the galaxy had tried so hard to forget. In that infinite moment, the oracle's song returned to him, not as a command or a beacon, but as a faint, sorrowful whisper in the back of his mind. It wasn't a song of hope anymore. It was a warning. The last dying echo of a choice made eons ago. The choice that had led to the terminus. He lowered his hand. "No," he said, his voice quiet but absolute. A single stone dropped into a deep and silent well. The word shattered the tension. Jorich's face contorted with disbelief, then contorted further into a mask of pure fury. "What did you say?" he hissed, stepping forward until he was inches from Kalen. "I said no," Kalen repeated, turning to face him, his gaze unwavering. "We will not awaken them. We will not become them." You do not have that choice, Yorick roared, his voice cracking with rage. The council has voted. The people have chosen. You are a pilot, a navigator who got lucky. You are not a king. He drew his sidearm, the advanced architect weapon humming to life with a menacing blue glow. Give the order, Kalen, or I will remove you from command and give it myself. Rorik and several other guards loyal to Jorik mirrored their chief, leveling their weapons. On the other side of the bridge, Elara looked up from her console, her face pale, while Leah took a step back, her hand flying to her mouth. The bridge of the Vindication had become a standoff, a civil war in miniature. This is not the way, Kalen said, his voice remaining impossibly calm. He felt the ship around him, its dormant systems listening, waiting. He was its commander, bound to it by a resonance that went deeper than verbal commands. Vengeance is a fire that consumes the hand that wields it. Our ancestors learned that when they broke the universe to win a war. Look where it left them. Asleep in tombs, their children hunted and living on scraps. We were given a second chance. Yorick, not to repeat their mistakes, but to learn from them. They owe us a debt of blood, Jorik yelled, taking aim, and we are here to collect before he could fire. Kalen closed his eyes. He didn't reach for a weapon or call for guards. He reached out with his mind, sinking into the heart of the Vindication. He let the last echoes of the Oracle guide him, not to a destination in space, but to the ship's core consciousness, the place where Janus was more than just a hologram. He opened a channel, not to the comm system, but to the neural network of the entire sanctuary, patching directly into the minds of every man, woman, and child. He bypassed their senses and spoke directly to their souls. And he did not use words. He showed them. He unleashed the raw, unfiltered memories stored within the ship's crystalline archives. He plunged them all into the final, agonizing days of the Architect Empire. They stood on the glass shard cities of Xylos Prime before it was the Xylan homeworld, a human colony of breathtaking beauty, and watched it burn under the assault of the biomechanical swarm. They felt the terror, the loss, the unendurable grief. Then he showed them the response. He made them feel the cold, hardening rage that transformed the architects from builders into destroyers. They felt the pride curdle into hubris. They sat in the command chairs of ships like the Vindication and gave the orders to deploy reality-rending torpedoes. They felt the sickening triumph of watching entire star systems unravel, of folding space to crush enemy fleets. And they felt the silent, creeping horror as they realized the weapons they used were poisoning the very fabric of existence. He showed them what they had become, a civilization so consumed by its righteous war that it had forgotten what it was fighting for, sacrificing its own soul to win. Finally, he showed them what Janus had only hinted at. He took them to the edge of the wound in the universe, the place the enemy had poured from. He gave them a fleeting, terrifying glimpse of what still waited in that non-space, a cold, patient, hungry intelligence, a consciousness of dissonant geometries and devouring metal, an enemy that had not been defeated, merely repelled. He made them understand that the Stylacracy's quarantine was not born of malice alone, but of a deep, abiding terror of reawakening that ancient conflict. He showed them that Jorik's path, the path of total war, would be a dinner bell, a signal flare to the true predators waiting in the dark, The psychic broadcast lasted less than a minute, but it stretched into an eternity. When it was over, a collective gasp echoed through the Orcs. On the bridge of the Vindication, Jorek stood frozen, his weapon lowered, his face ashen. The rage had been scoured from his eyes, replaced by a profound, soul-shaking horror. The gun clattered from his trembling fingers onto the deck. No one moved. The truth, in its full and terrible glory, had silenced them all. It was Mara who finally broke the silence, her voice trembling but clear. "He's right," she said, looking not at Kalen, but at the faces of the council. "We were so blinded by what was done to us, we didn't see what we were about to do to ourselves. The mutiny was over, defeated not by force, but by memory. In the cycles that followed, everything changed. The council was restructured. Yorick, humbled and broken by the vision, stepped down, willingly confining himself to quarters to contemplate the abyss he had nearly led them into. Kalen, with Mara and Leah at his side, laid out a new path. They would not be an empire. They would not be conquerors. They were the inheritors of a terrible power and an even more terrible wisdom. Their purpose was not to reclaim the past, but to safeguard the future. The sanctuary was retasked. Elara, her genius now directed toward creation, worked with Janus to master the world engine's terraforming capabilities. They began their greatest project not conquering a world, but building one. They captured rogue asteroids and barren planetoids, drawing them into the sanctuary's protected core. They used architect technology to ignite a small, stable star at its center, to spin atmospheres into existence, to seed oceans with engineered life. They were building a new Earth, a system born not from chance, but from choice. 1 year later, Kalen stood on the bridge of the Vindication. It was no longer a warship, but the guardian of a nascent solar system. Below him, inside the vast, cloaked sphere of the sanctuary, a world of impossible green and blue was taking shape. The stasis bays remained sealed, the sleeping legions of their ancestors now a silent trust, a reminder of a power they chose not to use. Leah stood beside him, watching the first engineered clouds drift across a newly formed ocean. "Do you think they'll ever understand?" she asked quietly. "The stellacracy, what we're doing." Kalen looked out at the new sun they had made, its light warm and full of promise. "Maybe not," he replied. "But they'll see that we didn't fire a single shot. They'll see that the ghosts they feared so much chose to build a garden instead of a graveyard. And maybe that will be enough." He felt the ship around him, content, its purpose redefined. The pressure of the void was gone, replaced by the gentle, rhythmic hum of a world being born. They were no longer the inheritors of a war. They were the architects of a dawn,